Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Like most people at the moment, I'm struggling for equipment. I got a few bits, probably about 40% of my max squat and deadlift. What's the most effective way of training with this low percentage? I've been trying to mix max reps and speed work. Well, here's your problem. When you're dealing with weights like 40 or 50% of your max on a squat or a deadlift, you're not going to get a hypertrophic effect by doing max reps. Now, people are going to say, but Jason, there's studies showing blah, blah. No, those are on small movements. That's on leg extensions, or what those studies were done on. 20 rep squats alone are nearly impossible to hypertrophy from. Why? Because you have to be in great shape to pull it off. Like if you've been doing lots of running and conditioning work and you're an athlete, you can probably get away with the 20 rep Widowmaker squats and make gains. But for people who are not in shape, that's not even going to work. And you start talking about 40% of your max, yeah, best of luck. You're going to fatigue yourself into the ground. You're going to fatigue your cardiovascular system before you reach muscular failure. Okay, that's what's going to happen. You're going to absolutely crush yourself in terms of like CNS and everything. There's a big myth that CNS fatigue comes from lifting heavy. That's not true. Really light weights, and particularly something to where you're doing it in an axial loading fashion, that's just going to burn you out very, very quickly. So here's what I'm going to say. Speed work, speed work, speed work. And because you only have 40% of your max, even normal speed work isn't going to be ideal. Here's what I'm going to say. Drop all the high rep work. It's not going to benefit you with weights that light on these movements. Okay? Do speed work on squats and deadlifts twice a week. Now, you need to get yourself on the lowest box you can find. In other words, because you have 40% of your squat max, you need to be at a 3-inch deficit. Get really explosive off the low box. Super explosive off the low box. Same thing, deficit deadlifts. Find a way to do a 3-inch deficit deadlift or something like that for speed. And because you're at 40% with raw weight, not 60%, not 65, you can do more sets. Right? You could come in and do 15 doubles. You could do 15 doubles easily for the speed boxes. You could do 20 singles on the speed pulls, even at a 2, 3, 4-inch deficit. That's what I would do. And then take that weight that you have and find ways to do supplemental lifts. Okay, you got 40% of your max. You can do tons of good mornings. You could do split squats. You can do all this other stuff for your rep work for the hypertrophy. And you need to focus on maximizing your speed work with the weight that you have. And that means extending the range of motion, getting deeper. Deficit deadlifts, deep box squats. That is what you need to do to make this work with the equipment you have. And if you do this, you will make gains. Not keep what you have. You will make gains doing this. Is it going to be as good of gains as if you had a perfect environment to do everything? No. But you will still make progress, not regression, doing this, if you do it the way that I described. All right, next question. If one had access to the seal row at a gym, would this be a better option than the pendlay rows for the novice? In theory, range of motion would be fixed. They have to hit the bench, right? Fixed range of motion with less range of motion. Okay. I want people to understand I am not against the seal row. Okay, I am not against the seal row. But you need specialized equipment to really do it right. Okay, they make specialty bars specifically for the seal row, by the way, you can get them. If you're serious about seal rows, you need to get the seal row bar. Otherwise, you're just doing a partial. You're doing a partial and you're not getting the scapular retraction at the top that we want, because that's what's going to limit your range of motion. Well, we need that scapular retraction if you want it to carry over things like the bench press to your squats, right? Not just building your back. The other thing that we have to remember here is that the seal row is not a replacement for the pendlay row. I don't know why people don't grasp this. There's a reason we do standing rows. You want to know what's a replacement for it? If you want to replace the pendlay row, well, I've replaced the pendlay row now. I do extremely heavy weight on reverse hyperextensions for enormous amounts of volume. And then I do inverted rows. Why? Because I don't need my rows to work my erectors, because I have the reverse hyper to handle that. How many of these novices are going to build their posterior chain up correctly? How many of them are practicing pulling from the floor enough? Well, I do speed pulls every single week. And I train my posterior chain and low back with enormous amounts of volume. So I get everything I would need out of a pendlay row by doing something else. Novice lifters, if anything, tend to have extremely weak posterior chains. They need the extra isometric training in their posterior chain of the row. They absolutely need it, or they're going to be weak and they're going to be injury prone. Right? People have to lose this idea of a lot of these exercises that we do. They're thinking in their head like a bodybuilder of, well, I'm just doing this for the lats and rear delts or whatever, right? No, there are reasons we use a lot of these rows in certain sports, in certain strength sports. The reason even Olympic lifters do the tons of pendlay rows, like why Glenn Pendlay had them do them. Proves their pull off the floor. Okay, there are other considerations here. So any form of chest supported row cannot replace a standing row. It can't. It only works half the muscles. You have to have something else to replace it. Now, how many of these novices are going to have access to a reverse hyper and push the holy hell out of it? None of them. So this is not a replacement. And the problem is that unless they have specialized equipment, such as, again, a seal row bar, they're also doing a partial on the only real exercise where they're working their lats and everything. That's a real bad idea. All right, next question and a last question of the week. I've got a home gym set up but can't damage the floor deadlifting. I have to deadlift, so would doing it on the lawn be an okay alternative? Man, this is a tricky question. It's a very tricky question because here's what I would say. There are ways to protect your floor. I mean, perfect example, you see me deadlifting in the background there, right? 615. You think I can really afford to damage this floor? No. I've built a platform. I might suggest to you that you build a platform, get EVA foam pads. Now, I don't know where you live, so that creates a problem. I know all my American lifters, they can get EVA foam pads really cheap and really easy. An 18-pack costs $100 on Amazon. The 1-inch ones, right? That'll do everything you need for it. Problem is, in other countries like the UK, getting a 12-pack is like $300. Okay, big difference. So this is something I deal with clients because I have 4 clients in the UK right now. So that becomes an issue for them with their home gyms. So here's what your other options are. You need to find a way to make sure it's stable outside, right? And I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to have a hell of a time changing weights on the ground out on the lawn. Like adding plates, you're going to try to find a deadlift jack, it's just going to dig into the ground. You're going to have a big muddy mess, rip lawn up everywhere, and you're going to get dirt and stuff everywhere. Your equipment's going to get filthy because changing weights is going to be tough. Also, you're going to need to make sure that your footing is stable. You standing on the ground and deadlifting, you better have a solid support under you. What I would recommend, you might need to find a piece of sidewalk where you can deadlift off of and have the plates hanging over the edges. Your other option would be to maybe just dig a very shallow hole and get like a tile, like a 2 or 3 inch block tile, like for gardening purposes, like gardening stones. I don't know if you've ever done any landscaping or anything. I have. And so there are certain blocks and things that you can get in tiles that you may need to embed one into the ground so that you can stand on it. Now, fortunately, it's easy enough to do. You see me there doing a close stance. If we're deadlifting and you're not really fat, you're going to be able to use a narrow stance ideally. In which case, one nice good tile that's a foot or 18 inches wide, but you can get 12-inch ones. You can dig it into the ground and use that. Just be aware that changing weights is going to be a little more difficult on ground than you think it is, especially if it's gotten wet and slippery out there. You're going to find it more difficult than you think. But the main thing to look at is your footing. If you have to go this route, your footing on the ground is going to be important. You're not going to be able to just stand on the bare dirt and do this. You're going to have an unstable surface and you're going to end up potentially injuring yourself if you're not careful. So you just need to be aware of that and find a way to maybe dig some landscaping stone like a tile or block into the ground to stand on, okay, to create a more stable surface. But there are other things you can do. There are things you can look into for protecting your floor also. So you have different options. Be creative, innovate, adapt. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.